Right now, somewhere in the world's oceans, there is a boat so fast that the United States government refuses to tell you its top speed because the number itself is classified. What we do know is this: it moves at more than 60 miles per hour across open water. It can be thrown out of the back of a cargo plane at altitude, and its only job is to put special operations troops on a hostile shore before anyone knows they are coming. And here's the part nobody expects. The biggest threat to the men riding that boat is not enemy fire. It is the boat itself. By the end of this video, you are going to see why the fastest troop insertion craft ever built has run into a wall that no engine, no hull design, and no amount of money can break through, and why the answer to that problem is going to change naval warfare forever. Today, we are counting through the fastest troop insertion military boats on the planet, from the river gunboats of the American swamps to a 550-ton Soviet monster that China is now mass producing for one very specific reason. Some of these numbers are official, some are leaked. And one of them, the one at the very top, is a figure so extreme that when you first hear it, you will assume I misspoke. Stay with me, because the order of this list is not what you think it is. Let's start with the boat that quietly became the most talked about vessel of this entire war generation. It is Swedish, it is barely 16 meters long, and right now it is giving the Russian Black Sea Fleet a genuine nightmare. This is the Combat Boat 90, the CB-90. And if you want to understand what a modern troop insertion craft actually is, this is where you begin. The CB-90 was accepted by the Swedish Navy back in 1990, and the name tells you everything about its purpose. The 90 is the year. The H in its Swedish designation stands for half, because it carries and deploys half a platoon of amphibious infantry. That is 18 fully equipped soldiers delivered over the bow ramp directly onto a beach, a rock shelf, or a shoreline that no landing craft in history could have touched. Its draft is less than a meter. Its twin water jets push it past 40 knots, which is around 74 kilometers per hour, in water so shallow that a conventional propeller boat would tear itself apart. But raw speed is not what makes this boat special. It is what the boat can do at that speed. The CB-90 can execute violent, sharp turns at close to its maximum velocity. It can adjust its pitch and roll while underway using underwater control surfaces that work like the diving planes on a submarine, and it can go from top speed to a dead stop in 2.5 boat lengths. Picture that for a second. 70 kilometers per hour to zero in about 40 meters. That is not a boat slowing down. That is a boat slamming on brakes that boats are not supposed to have. For a coxswain running troops onto a defended shore at night, that ability to sprint, stop, drop the ramp, unload 18 soldiers, and be gone in seconds is the entire game. More than 250 of these are in service around the world, and the newest version raises the bar again. The CB-90 Next Generation, delivered to the Swedish Navy as the Docksta CB-90 HSM, has a redesigned driveline, a repositioned engine that optimizes the center of gravity, and new, more efficient water jets. Saab officially says over 40 knots at maximum combat load. Analysts who have watched it run believe a lightly loaded boat is closer to 45 knots. It carries Saab's TrackFire remote weapon station, a stabilized gun system that locks onto a target and holds it no matter how hard the boat maneuvers underneath it, which means this thing can shoot accurately while doing the kind of turns that would throw an untrained passenger across the deck. And this is where the story gets very current. Ukraine has been receiving CB-90s in waves. Sweden included 10 of them in a massive military aid package. The Netherlands sent 3 more. Norway contributed as well. And in 2026, the Ukrainian Navy confirmed it had received enough of them to stand up an entire division of these boats. The commander of the Ukrainian Navy called them fast, highly maneuverable, reliable, and among the best in the world. They are already operating in the waters around Crimea. Think about what that means. A boat designed in the 1980s for defending Swedish fjords is now landing and extracting troops in the most heavily surveilled, most drone-saturated body of water on Earth. And it is surviving because speed and agility are still the best armor a small boat can have. Hold that thought about armor, because the next boat on this list took the opposite bet entirely. It decided that if you cannot be hit, you do not need armor at all. But before we get to America's classified fleet, you need to meet the boat that walked so those machines could run, because its story explains everything that came after. In 1995, the United States Navy fielded the Mark V Special Operations Craft, an 82-foot dagger of a boat built to do one thing: carry Navy SEALs to the fight at 50 knots. 50 knots is over 92 kilometers per hour. And in 1995, that made the Mark V one of the fastest things in any Navy anywhere. It could take a full SEAL squad hundreds of miles, screaming across the ocean at highway speed, and put them in the water close enough to swim in. For nearly 2 decades, it was the backbone of American maritime special operations. And it had a dark secret that would not be fully understood for years. Riding a Mark V at speed in rough water was like being in a car crash that lasted for hours. The hull slammed off wave tops over and over, and every impact traveled straight up through the deck into the spines and skulls of the men on board. Veterans of those boats accumulated back injuries, neck injuries, and worse. Remember that detail. It is not a side note. It is the thread that runs through this entire video, and at the end, it is going to explain why the fastest boats in the world have hit a ceiling that nobody talks about publicly. The Mark V was retired, and what replaced it is the reason the phrase classified top speed keeps coming up. The United States Special Operations Command now runs a 3-tier family of insertion craft, and the smallest one is the workhorse. It is called the Combatant Craft Assault, the CCA, and it is 41 feet of composite material shaped like a stealth fighter that fell into the ocean. Officially, the Navy will only say the CCA exceeds 40 knots. Unofficially, everyone who has studied it agrees the real number is far beyond that. The company that builds it, United States Marine Incorporated, sells a nearly identical hull, 2 feet longer, that does over 55 knots in calm water, and reporting on the special operations community consistently describes the CCA reaching speeds of more than 60 miles per hour. It uses surface-piercing propellers, a drive system where the props run partially out of the water to slash drag, the same technology offshore racing boats use. It carries a crew of 4 special warfare combatant craft crewmen and around 8 operators. It mounts 50 caliber machine guns, miniguns, and grenade launchers, and 32 of them have been delivered. Now here is the detail that separates the CCA from every other boat on this list. It can be airdropped. An Air Force C-17 flies out over the ocean, opens the rear ramp, and pushes the entire boat out under static line parachutes. The crew jumps after their own boat, swims to it in open water, cuts it loose from the chutes, and drives away. That means the United States can put a 60-mile-per-hour gunboat full of special operators into any ocean on the planet within hours of a phone call. No port, no warship, no warning. When people ask why America spends what it spends on defense, this is the kind of capability that money buys, a boat that arrives from the sky. Above the CCA sits the Combatant Craft Medium, 60 feet long, low, angular, and clandestine, built to slide operators into medium threat environments. And in the last 2 years, SOCOM has been testing something wild on it, a pop-up launcher that hides flush inside the hull and rises to fire 8 loitering munitions. That is a stealth boat that inserts a SEAL team and then hangs offshore, launching kamikaze drones in support. The line between transport and warship is dissolving in front of us. And then there is the big one, the one the Navy barely acknowledges exists. The Combatant Craft Heavy, nicknamed SEALian, which stands for SEAL Insertion, Observation, and Neutralization. Over 77 feet long, shaped like a spearhead, fully enclosed, and climate controlled. And here's the part that sounds like science fiction. It is semi-submersible, The Celian can flood itself down until almost nothing shows above the waterline, loitering off a hostile coast for surveillance with its sensors and weapons retracted into the hull to kill its radar signature. Pentagon budget documents list 40 knots of speed, 400 nautical miles of range, 12 passengers, and a large rear hatch that can launch jet skis, inflatable raiding craft, and individual combat divers directly into the sea. It is the closest thing on Earth to a surface submarine, and the Navy liked it enough to order another one from Fincantieri in 2024. So at this point, you might be thinking, the Americans and the Swedes have this category locked up. Not so fast. Because there is a viral claim going around social media right now that the fastest troop insertion boats in the world are not built in the United States or Sweden at all. They are built in the Philippines, and the truth behind that claim is more interesting than the claim itself. The boat in question is the multi-purpose assault craft, the MPAC, and its origin story is genuinely great. In the late 2000s, the Philippine Navy was fighting insurgent groups across an archipelago of more than 7,000 islands. They needed fast boats to chase militants and insert troops in shallow water, but every foreign shipbuilder they approached said their budget was impossible. The bidding failed 3 separate times. So a local company called PropMech stepped up, partnered with a Taiwanese shipyard, and promised the Navy 99% of what it wanted at the price it could actually pay. The result was a 15-meter aluminum assault boat with water jets, a bow ramp, a top speed of 40 knots, and room for up to 16 fully equipped troops. And these boats have actually fought. During operations against the Abu Sayyaf terrorist group, an MPAC intercepted a boat full of militants, fought a gun battle that lasted nearly half an hour, and ended it by ramming the enemy boat. Later versions hit 45 knots, dropped the troop ramp, and picked up Israeli Spike missiles instead, which made them the first missile-armed vessels in the entire history of the Philippine Navy. So is the MPAC the fastest troop insertion boat in the world, like the viral posts say? No. 40 to 45 knots puts it in the same class as the CB-90, not above the classified American craft. But pound for pound and peso for peso, it might be the best value insertion boat ever built, and it proves you do not need a superpower budget to play this game. Now, everything we have covered so far carries 8, 12, maybe 18 troops. What comes next carries 500. And it does it at speeds that should be physically impossible for something that weighs as much as a destroyer escort. This is the Zubr class, a Soviet-designed air cushion landing craft, and it is the largest military hovercraft ever built. Full load displacement, 555 tons, cargo options, 3 main battle tanks, or 10 armored vehicles, plus over 200 troops, or 500 soldiers packed into its bays. And the speed, a 500-ton vessel cruising at 55 knots, with a top speed around 60, and later models built for export reportedly touching 63 knots. That is a building moving at over 110 kilometers per hour, riding on a cushion of air, immune to shallow water, immune to most naval mines, capable of driving straight out of the sea, up the beach, over a 5-degree gradient, and unloading tanks onto dry land. Roughly 70% of the world's coastline is accessible to a hovercraft like this, compared to a fraction of that for conventional landing craft. The Soviets built them to storm beaches in the Baltic. Greece bought 4. Russia kept a couple running. And then the story took a turn that should have every defense analyst in the Pacific sitting upright. Because China bought 4 from Ukraine in 2014, learned everything about how they work, and started building its own. In March of 2026, naval intelligence analysts confirmed something significant. China has moved its Zubr copy into series production. At least 5 have been built domestically, bringing the Chinese fleet to a minimum of 9, by far the largest Zubr force of any nation, with an eventual fleet of 10 to 12 considered completely reasonable. And analysts are not shy about why this matters. A Zubr can cross the Taiwan Strait, deliver its cargo directly onto a beach, and make several round trips in a single day. It does not need a port. It does not need a beachhead cleared of obstacles. It flies over sandbars, mudflats, and minefields that would stop everything else. When a country starts mass producing the fastest heavy landing craft ever designed, it is telling you what it is preparing for without saying a word. And China did not stop there. Alongside the Zubr, it operates the Type 726, its own air-cushioned landing craft that rides inside amphibious dock ships. And some published rankings credit the Type 726 family with speeds up to 80 knots. 80 knots. That is over 90 miles per hour from a craft carrying a main battle tank. Even if the true sustained figure is lower, this is the direction amphibious warfare is heading. Entire mechanized units moving at speeds we used to associate with speedboats. The Americans, for the record, have their own version, the LCAC, which hauls 70 tons at over 50 knots from ship to shore and has been the backbone of Marine Corps landings for decades. But if we are being honest about the crown for heavy, fast troop delivery, the air cushion race right now runs through Beijing, and that fact alone reshuffles the balance of an entire ocean. But here is your next question, and it is the right one. If hovercraft can hit 60 knots and stealth boats can hit 60 miles per hour, what is the actual fastest combat vessel a Navy has ever put into service? Because there has to be a ceiling somewhere, and there is. It lives in Norway. The Skjold-class corvette is 274 tons of Norwegian aggression built from carbon fiber composites, and its official maximum speed is 60 knots. When it entered service, it was the fastest combat ship afloat anywhere on Earth. The trick is a design called a surface effect ship. It looks like a catamaran, but between its two rigid hulls, fans blow air into a skirted compartment, partially lifting the entire vessel and letting it skim rather than plow. Gas turbines pump 6,000 kilowatts into each water jet for sprint speed. During trials, the prototype exceeded 60 knots in serious sea conditions, and this is not a museum piece. In February 2026, Norway signed contracts to upgrade the fire control radars, electro-optical sensors, and combat systems of all 6 ships, specifically to keep these 60-knot ghosts hunting in the high north against Russian naval pressure into the 2030s. The Skjold is not a troop carrier, it is a missile corvette, but it matters to this story for one reason. It defines the practical speed limit for a real, armed, crewed warship, and even its record eventually fell, beaten by an interceptor called the WP-18, built in Abu Dhabi. Raw speed on water is a solved problem if you throw enough turbine at it. Keeping human beings functional at that speed is not. And that brings us back to the thread I asked you to hold on to at the beginning, because it is time to pay it off. In March 2026, the Department of Defense Inspector General published a report about the crews of America's combatant craft, the men who drive the CCA and its siblings. The findings are brutal. These boats travel at speeds approaching 70 miles per hour, and when a hull moving that fast slams off a wave, the impact can exceed 20 times the force of gravity, 20 G. For reference, decreased oxygen flow to the brain can begin at 3 to 4 G. Fighter pilots wear pressure suits and train for years to handle 9. These boat crews eat repeated spikes beyond 20, sometimes for hours, standing up, wearing body armor, helmets, and night vision, hunched over consoles that force them into the worst possible posture for their spines. A study of retired crewmen found that a third of them had been knocked unconscious by wave slams at some point in their careers. 70% said injuries to their backs and necks had impaired their ability to do the job. The Inspector General warned that traumatic brain injuries from this repetitive slamming threaten not just individual sailors, but the long-term sustainability of the entire force. Read that again. The United States military, the organization that can drop a stealth gunboat out of an airplane, is being told that its fastest boats are grinding down the brains of the people who ride them. This is the wall I promised you at the start. It is not an engineering wall. Hull designers can build faster boats tomorrow. It is a biological wall. Water does not compress. At 60 and 70 miles per hour, every wave becomes concrete. And there is no suspension system, no shock mitigating seat, no clever hull shape that fully protects a human body from thousands of concrete impacts per mission. The Navy is now studying head and neck support devices, adjustable seating, and sensors to measure the shock crews absorb, but the fundamental truth remains. The fastest troop insertion boats in the world have reached the edge of what the troops themselves can survive riding in. So what happens next? The answer's already in the water, and it is the final act of this story. In early 2026, off Key West, the United States Navy ran an exercise linking surveillance drones in the sky to unmanned speedboats on the water. Autonomous interceptor craft from the Tsunami family with variants exceeding 40 knots and some topping 50, hunting targets with no one on board to be injured. Off the coast of the Philippines during exercise Salaknib 2026, autonomous American surface vessels escorted an Army logistics ship carrying Philippine troops and armored personnel carriers over 260 miles to port, scanning for threats the entire way, compressing a commander's decision cycle from hours to seconds. China answered in March 2026 with the first operational test of its L-30 drone boat swarm, multiple 35-knot unmanned vessels autonomously detecting, tracking, and boxing in an intruder off Zhuhai with no crews aboard at all. And in the Black Sea, the future already fights. Ukrainian Magura drone boats, small, fast, remotely piloted, have chased down and destroyed patrol boats guarding the Kerch Bridge, crippled tankers within sight of the Russian coast, and in one operation that still sounds impossible, launched missiles that shot down 2 Russian fighter jets from the water, from a boat with nobody in it. Meanwhile, Ukrainian special forces still run crude high-speed raids, including a landing on a Russian-occupied island in the Black Sea where the Ukrainian flag went up and every operator came home, proving that even in the drone age, sometimes you still need a fast boat and brave people willing to ride it into the dark. So here's where this all lands. The fastest troop insertion boats in the world are faster than they have ever been. The CB-90 delivering half a platoon onto a rock shelf at over 40 knots. The MPAC proving a mid-sized nation can build a 45-knot assault craft on a shoestring. The Zubr and its Chinese offspring hurling tanks across the sea at 60 knots, while a fleet of them takes shape across the strait from Taiwan. The Skjold skimming Norwegian fjords at 60 knots on a cushion of air. And at the top, America's classified CCA dropped from the sky screaming past 60 miles per hour, so extreme that its own crews have become the limiting factor. The next generation of these machines will be faster still, because the thing that held speed back for a century, the fragile human body strapped inside, is being engineered out of the loop. The insertion boats of 2035 may race to the beach at speeds no crewed craft could survive, escorted by autonomous gunboats, screened by drone swarms. With the troops arriving in the one vessel of the group still designed around flesh and bone, the age of the fast boat is not ending. It is shedding its last constraint. If this video changed how you think about naval speed, get subscribed, because next time we are going deeper into the semi-submersible Celian and the secret world of boats designed never to be seen at all. Drop a comment with the craft that shocked you most. My money says it is the 20 G-Wave slams, and I will see you in the next one.